Good morning to you all. We're back at it again today. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Happy Monday morning, bright and early to everybody. So today we're going to continue our InDesign portion of the class, and we're going to talk extensively about portfolios, which is your final assignment of the course. And actually, I started the slideshow a bit prematurely. Hold on a second. Let me exit out of it, because I wanted to show you your assignment 107 is now posted online, and this assignment is your final assignment for the semester. So I'm giving it to you now in anticipation that you're going to be working on it on and off for the remainder of the semester. So I know it starts in early, but I want you to have time to think about it, to process it, to do drafts, and to make it better. We will spend a lot of time in our check-ins going over portfolios, doing red lines, and I'm very optimistic this semester that we'll come up with some really, really good portfolios. I think there'll be a lot of hands-on feedback, and I think that's a good thing. So your assignment 107 is worth 30% of your overall grade, so 600 points in the Canvas system. It begins today and is due on midnight, Monday, May 16th, which is the Monday of the last week of classes. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I have it due on that Monday so that it's out of the way and you can concentrate on all the rest of the finals and not have this hanging over your head as you go into finals week. So we're going to start today with part one. That's basically collecting work that you've already created. It might be your assignment 101 and 102. It may be more than just that. Maybe you have work from 121 or 120 or another class, or maybe you've done your own independent work. You're going to start by kind of collecting that and working to build a layout that works for you in InDesign. It takes a lot of chewing to get the right portfolio down and to make it really work well. I think when I did my grad school portfolio, I think I did 7 complete portfolios before I decided, well, maybe complete's a little bit too much. 7 partial portfolios before I wound up with the final version, because it took that long to kind of flush out the design and figure out how I really wanted to show what it is that I wanted to show. So we're going to work on that. We're going to start working on the layout portion. After that, we're going to move into doing a front cover. That'll be a separate exercise down the road. We'll come back and work on a front cover. And then ultimately, we'll come back and revisit the layout, the front cover, make sure everything's just really working well and all your best work is in it. So as I said, it's due on that Monday. That's a hard deadline, so I'm not accepting any work after that. For today, we're going to work on 112. And in 112, we're really just working on the preliminary layout for the first 2 pages. And I'll show you this in Adobe InDesign. So we'll spend a lot of time in InDesign today talking about how do you set this up, how maybe you could use masters on a page, how can you put page numbers on a page, those kinds of things. So we'll work through those kinds of detail today. You're going to end up posting a JPEG today of your first 2 pages. Well, actually, you might not post it today, but by Sunday at midnight, you'll post that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back into my slideshow now. And we'll start really talking about portfolios. And portfolios are something that's really important for any design student, for any design professional, because this is the document that really shows who you are as a designer and gets people to want your skills. So whether it's you're applying to, let's say, school, maybe it's undergrad, maybe it's grad school, you're giving somebody this portfolio so that they can evaluate how you are as a designer and whether you fit with them. Likewise, let's say you go to work for a firm and you're trying to decide what firm. You're going to hand that firm a portfolio and they're going to look at that portfolio and decide whether you fit with them. Maybe you're trying to get work. Maybe you're going to work for a client. They're going to ask you for a portfolio of their work. You're going to give them that and they're going to decide on whether you are the right fit for them based on this document. So it's really, really important in the design fields for you to have a good portfolio. So what is the portfolio fundamentally about? Well, on the surface, everybody says, well, it's a group of my work. It's all of my work put together into one document. Well, that's true, but it's really much more about telling the story of you, the designer. Who are you? What are you interested in? What are your passions? And what are you good at? Often portfolios focus too much on certain skills, like, oh, I'm really good at 3D rendering, or I'm really good at AutoCAD, or I'm really good at Photoshop. Well, those are skills that you have, but are they really who you are as a designer? If you think about that, if you presented a portfolio that was based on skill, oh, I'm really good at AutoCAD. Well, if a firm's going to hire you, they're going to hire you because you are really good at AutoCAD, and they're going to stick you in a role where you just do AutoCAD all day. Not very much design work. So you want to show who you are as a designer. That's really important. So you're telling the story of you as a designer. What makes you different and unique from all the other designers that are applying for the same position? That's also really important. What differentiates you from everybody else? So in that portfolio, we always need to have some kind of an introductory page. And that introductory page, so this is, I open the front cover, I look at the first page, what am I going to see? Generally, it identifies you, the designer, so it probably has your name on it. It may identify the projects that are going to be in your portfolio, and it might contain a little bit of additional information about yourself. In the examples here, and we're going to see a lot of examples as we go forward today, these two pages went together, and I'm going to come back to this, but you've got who the person is, followed by a table of contents. This is the work that I'm going to show you in the portfolio. The other critical component to a portfolio is that you want to keep it current. So you don't want to have projects that are so old in your portfolio. You want to have the last 3 to 5 years worth of projects, maybe. Maybe it's only the last year's worth of projects. Now, of course, this breaks down, let's say that you're going to propose an architectural project and it has to do with an aquatic center. And you did an aquatic center 10 years ago. And you want to apply for this current job and it's an aquatic center. Well, you probably want to show your previous aquatic center. So there's always shuffling to be done. And that's the beautiful thing about creating your portfolios in InDesign, is that you can choose what pages to include or not include. You can rearrange the pages as necessary. So the portfolio needs to fundamentally be a living document, and it's always being updated. There's always new stuff that's going into that portfolio. And the truth is, you should be proud of your new work and want to include that just as much as your old work. Know the purpose of each project that's in your portfolio. This is also important. So if you're really good at 3D renderings and you just put 3D renderings on every page, you're not really understanding the purpose of this portfolio. Think about, why is this project good at showing who you are as a designer? And in the early days of school, you're really going to include just your school projects because that's what you've done. When you get further along, let's say you're in grad school, let's say you're going to work for a firm, you're going to start to pick which projects are really identify with you. What makes you interested? What do you want to do again? Those are the projects that end up in the portfolio. What do you hope to show by showing this project? What do you hope to show by including this in your portfolio? Maybe it's a diversity of skill, a way of overcoming different challenges. Those are all important aspects to which projects you choose in your portfolio. So this is the other sticky one, and that is that you oftentimes, especially in school, end up doing group work. Actually, in the real world, you do a lot of group work too. Group work is difficult to include in a portfolio unless you actually go forward with it and say, this is the part that I did as part of this group work. So you focus on your contribution to the group work while acknowledging the other members. So you should come forward and say, this was a group project, and this is what I worked on in the group project. And I think this is a really obvious one when you step back from it, because let's say that you and several other students are applying to Berkeley or Cal Poly or SciArc, and you all work together in a group. Well, each of you is going to want to put this group project in a portfolio. And when you do that, that's fine. But the same people that are evaluating your portfolio are evaluating the other portfolios, and they're going to see the work 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, depending on how many people are in your group. Well, if you don't identify what it is you did, they're going to be confused about what your contribution to the group was. So you want to be forward about saying, this is a group project, and this is what we did, and this is specifically what I did as part of that group project. A killer portfolio is also a well-designed portfolio. The best portfolios out there have a graphic design underlay that you don't even notice. You get so immersed in the content of what's on these pages that you don't really notice that there's a good graphic design behind it. Great portfolios absolutely take time to evolve. There's a reason why I'm giving you this project now. We're not even halfway through the semester. I'm giving it to you now so that it can have time to mature and evolve. Make sure that you're trusting your intuition. That's an important step to this portfolio. You work on it, then you step back and you look at it again. Maybe you share it with somebody. Maybe you come to one of our check-in sessions and you show it to other people and you get their feedback. Those are all really important things that help develop this portfolio. When I was working on my portfolio for grad school, like I said before, I did those 7 drafts. Well, frequently with those drafts, I go take it to somebody and have them review it. And when one of my former professors looked at it and said, you know, this isn't working or that isn't working, then I'd go back and I'd work on it again and I'd push it further. And those are really all important steps toward that final document. There are some technical steps in terms of setting this up that we need to work through. There's an inner and outer margin. In a portfolio, frequently the inner margin needs to be a little bit larger than the outer margin. And we say 2 times the outer. And the reason that we do that is because there's always going to be, and this is for a printed version, a binding that runs down the middle. And whether that's a spiral binding or a comb binding, it takes away from the center of your portfolio. And when you take away that center strip, you don't want to be cutting through something important, especially text. So you'll need to make sure that that area stays clean for the binding. So we're anticipating that binding style. Bleed is also something that's important and we'll set up today. Bleed is the idea that you want to have color bleed all the way off the page. You have an image, you want to make sure it goes all the way off the page. Well, when these books are produced and cut, the cuts aren't always perfect. And the last thing that you want is a little stripe of white where the color image happened. So when we put this bleed in, we give it an intentional little bit of extra color so that when the book is physically printed and trimmed, we'll make sure that we have a full color to the edge. We're also going to be using Cmyk mode for printing because this is a printed portfolio. Actually, it's now probably going to be an online version, but we want to make sure that it's in Cmyk mode because people may print it. So here's a typical setup. And as I said before in this setup, the inner margin is typically double what the outer margin is, right over there. This little area there, this little area here, that's what the bleed is. That's an extra 1/8 of an inch that runs all the way around the outside of the page so that we make sure that we have enough color to go all the way off the page. This right here is the actual trim line. That's where the page should be when it's all done. So let's start looking at some examples. And I'm going to show you several different examples. Some of these examples are professional examples, and some of these examples are student examples that are in your shoes. So I took a couple portfolios from students at DVC that have gone through the same classes that you're going through so that you could see how they chose to arrange their portfolio. But I'm going to start first with Alex Holgraph's portfolio. This is volume 3 of his portfolio. He probably has volume 4 out by now. He produces a lot of work and a lot of really high quality work. This is the cover for his volume 3 portfolio. This is actually a wraparound cover. So the spine is right there. That's the spine. So the front is going this way. The back is going this way. So we can put an F up here for front. Okay, so that's the front and the back. There's a nice little spine decoration there so you can see it when it's on a shelf. So that's the cover. We'll come back to portfolio covers a little bit later on. There it is once it's all folded up in its form. And let's look at that first page. So remember, on your first page, there needs to be some information about you, the designer. That's important. So right here, in this case, we've got his actual website, which happens to be his name, which is nice. And this is just a draft of his portfolio. So this is some more information that would be about him, but obviously it's just filler text right now. And you can actually see, if you look closely, these are all little pieces of filler text. And that's fine. You can use filler text right now as you start to lay this out. But the idea is that these would all be little bits of information about the particular content that would be within. So this next page right here is about what's in the portfolio. So we have 4 projects, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we've got those 4 projects. Each one has a little graphic that represents it. That graphic is going to reappear on various pages. It's got a little bit of text that's about what the project is fundamentally about. So we've got that table of contents. We've also got the content about who Alex is. And that provides our first introductory page. And this is certainly something that you could start on, though I encourage you to start on the actual content pages first, because that'll fold back into the graphic design of the front page here. So here's this first page of this portfolio. Notice that there is a tie. We're looking at the cube house here. And so as we come forward, we're seeing the cubes in the upper corners as reference. We have kind of you could call it almost a rule of thirds, where we have content over 2/3 of the page. We can say this is 2/3. And we have text over 1/3. So he's using that to kind of establish this layout. Let's jump forward. See the next page. Okay, so this is important as we start to see how these pages are laid out. They're still a roughly 2/3. Obviously, they're reversed here, and 1/3. So there's consistency to how this is laid out. Notice that the fonts are also similar as we go from page to page. If I jump back, fonts are the same here as they are there. Notice that this yellow is becoming kind of an accent color. We talked about using that accent color throughout a whole document. So there's a little bit of yellow behind it. Move on to the next page. New project. Same portfolio, new project. Well, once again, we have a tie back to that 2/3, 1/3. And he's very carefully established this line. Notice that it's more than just this gray bar down here at the bottom. It lines up with the middle rib of this drawing. It also lines up right here with the text. So we're using that same layout over and over again. Now, obviously, in this case, the image spans past, but we've got cues of the 2/3 and 1/3 layout. Now, take a moment also when we're going through this and look at the quality of the work here. Look at the renderings, look at the overall quality of what this feels like as a portfolio. This is really high-level work. And it's important for you guys to see it and to anticipate what is high-level work. What do I want my work to look like? Alex Holgraph does a great job with how these are set up. Notice that the fonts are similar again, and we have those little graphics in the corners that tell us what project we're on. This works well when there's multiple pages per project. Okay, so once again, we've got that same 2/3, 1/3. And we're seeing kind of a perspective view and an exploded axonometric view. We have the same little icons in the corners. That's important. Font choice is consistent. To me, if I were being critical, I think this image over here is kind of hard to read. It's kind of overexposed or darkened a little bit too much. There's a little bit too much grunge to really understand what's going on. I'd like to see that a little bit cleaner. I think there's too much background texture to this particular image. And that's part of looking at portfolios and deciding what's appropriate and what's not. Four full pages or 2 full pages of renderings. Beautiful renderings. Notice though, we're still getting that 2/3, 1/3. Actually, this is a little bit more like 3/4, 1/4. So, but it's still in the same vein, and we've got that division line that's consistently happening. We also right here have those same little cues that are telling us what project this belongs to. So let's look at another example of portfolio. I don't know who this is. I suspect that this is a student. This is the front cover of the portfolio. First page. We've got kind of a lot of information here about the person. We've got kind of a mini resume. We've got education, we've got experience, and then we have right down here for skills. This is really tempting for students, especially for students, to rate their skill level. I think this is a terrible idea. Sorry if this person is out there listening to me. But when you rate your skill level, why would I be interested in hiring you or having you do work for me? Right? If you say you're not very good in Rhino and Grasshopper, well, I'm definitely not going to hire you. Why limit yourself? If I look at your work and think you're a good designer, I can assume that you can learn this stuff. So instead of having these skill bars there, just say proficient in AutoCAD, Revit, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever. Don't try to say, oh, I'm kind of 50-50 at it. That's not a good strategy. So I would actually remove this whole part altogether. If you're going to include part of your resume on this front page, don't put this kind of stuff in. You can live with just your education experience. I actually think it would be fine if we got rid of all of this and just had this information kind of down here in the center of the page. That'd be okay. On this side, we have a beautiful table of contents. I think this is set up well. I think the font choices are particularly good. Typography is excellent. And we have little mini versions of each project, so we kind of see what we're looking for as it comes together. It's not necessary that you have those little mini drawings. I know Alex Holgraph showed them. This person has shown them. It's not necessary that you have them. You could just have the page numbers and the title. I think it would be nice to have a little bit of text under these to tell what the project is kind of fundamentally about. But again, not necessary. Notice, however, the font choice is spectacular. We move to the next page. Okay, we still have kind of a setup here. We've got a 2/3, 1/3. There's an awful lot of empty space right here, but I think in this drawing, it kind of works. And those are the compromises that you end up having to make. They've introduced a little line that shows up here. That's going to repeat over the course of the portfolio. And again, the typography is consistent from title to body content. Another example here. There's the cover. First page. No information about the student or the designer. I think that's a missing opportunity. So where is that? Over here, we've got a great set of table of contents. You don't have to call it contents. You could say projects. You could say selected works. Any of those examples would work well. I actually personally like selected works. I think that's nice. This student did a separate next page resume. Again, the name of the student isn't anywhere on here. So I think it would be nice to have that. But we do have kind of a full resume in the next page here. And then we can start to look at the projects that they have. So we've got the full color layout. I think if it were me, this text would be moved over, kind of aligned to the right. And I think this drawing, while beautiful, has a slight problem. And that is in the composition, this, which is the key object of the design, falls right on the seam of the portfolio. So if you can imagine this in book form, it's either going to be stuck in the crease of the book, or if we had it bound with like a comb or a spiral, when you go to open it, there'd be a bunch of holes right along here that are cutting right through your drawing. So think about taking that drawing and moving it over. So in this context, I would take the text and I'd move it over to here. And I'd take this drawing and I'd move it over to right here. I think in that context, it would show really well. Next page. This student consistently has a multiple column layout, right? So we can see that we have roughly, there's one column, there's two columns, there's three columns, like that. And they're going to stay pretty consistent with those columns across all of their design work. Yep, see, there's our columns again. 1, 2, 3, and then 4 on the right. So they're kind of consistently setting those up. You can see the transformation process of how you go from here. And then each of these shows something different that's happening. And then we've got the 4 floor plans here. So it's really nicely laid out, a lot of dense information. I think this is also something that's important to note in that this probably looks nothing like the project that they presented, the boards that they presented on the wall. It's been rearranged to fit in a portfolio context. So just because you presented it one way in a poster form doesn't mean that it can't be reorganized to fit in a portfolio. So this is Bashir's, and I think Bashir is one of the lecturers that's coming this week, or not, I don't think it's this week, but I think it's in a couple weeks that the ACE Club's putting on. So this was a former DVC student. This was his portfolio when he was basically your age in school. And this is his presentation of information. So he called his an index, and he put his page numbers and stuff here, or excuse me, his page numbers are there, and his projects are listed in the next column. I still think he probably should have put his name right here. This is his introductory page. Shows some sketches, shows some actual text here about himself. We move into the next project. So this was his Mondrian Museum. And so these are the same things that you're going to be doing. Same projects that you're going to be doing. And there's this Calder Museum. There's still a nice, strong 2/3, 1/3. That's a very common setup for these portfolio pages, is the 2/3, 1/3. And we could argue that this is kind of a 2/3, 1/3, because this is all one page too, as we flip through. 2/3, 1/3. Consistent font choice. I'm not sure that I would have necessarily chosen to make all of these lowercase, but he did. And we have a nice strong 2/3, 1/3 there. So now this was a group project. So what did Bashir do? He identified who was in the group right there. Great strategy. You don't have to say this is a group project, but by putting multiple names there, it's obvious that it's a group project. So then we flip forward and we say, okay, this is some basic information about the project. I'm guessing he probably did these drawings. Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead. Right, this is information about the project, but when we go to the next page, this I know was all about him. The code that was involved in getting these LEDs to light up and what have you, this was really what he did as part of the project. So he's emphasizing that in a whole spread. Some renderings that he did, again, a strong 2/3, 1/3 layout. Another example of a student. Right, so he's organized it a little bit differently. Instead of by project, he organized it by his classes. And so these should be familiar. So he's, again, very consistent typography, page to page. And we can see this consistency showing up each time. I believe that this was set up not to be facing pages, which means that the pages weren't supposed to be spreads and open. They were just individual pages, page after page. So when you start to think of it in that context, the consistency of where the text falls starts to make much, much more sense. He's got a little bit down here at the bottom that's telling us what project we're on. And again, consistent text. And each layout is kind of done with that text in mind. So these are a couple links here that can help get you more information. Visualizingarchitecture.com is Alex Holgraph's website. I would strongly encourage you to go there. I know if you're an industrial design student, I apologize, but his graphics are quite spectacular. So it's still worth looking at. And this Design Journal article has a lot of further information about Portfolios. So while I'm here, let me minimize that for a second. I'll just go to Alex Holgraph. He has alexholgraph.com, but he also has Visualizing Architecture. Visualizing Architecture, there we go. And so this just gives he has some tutorials. There's even some portfolio tutorials that you can look at. See, he's up to volume 5 of his portfolios. There's volume 4. He has all kinds of, like, we could get in here and look at how he creates some of these drawings. So if you're looking for inspiration, this is a great place to look, because he does just a spectacular job of kind of identifying and doing great work. He does have a blog, so you can read more information about the projects that he's working on. What he does is he's called a visualization artist. And so projects or architects will frequently go to him and say, can you do the visuals for me, for my board? And so while he does his own work, he also works for other architects doing just the visualizations and stuff. And he's quite talented. So I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time looking there and get some ideas. Again, under tutorials, he has stuff for all his portfolios. You can see over here, he has a bunch of work. These are his projects that he's working on, etc. So I would spend some time looking. I think it's a great work. I've always loved this one. I think it's really, really exciting. Anyway, so I'll let you guys work on that. What we want to do now is I want to take some time in Adobe InDesign and start to think about how do we lay out this portfolio. So I'm going to open up Adobe InDesign. And maybe it'll open for me eventually. Perfect. So the first order of business is really understanding what size page do I want. And so we could just start with a letter size page, but let's go to more presets and let's start thinking about what it is we really want. So I'm going to change my units here into inches. And then this is where you're deciding, do you want an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to work with? Do you want it to be in portrait or in landscape? Maybe you want it to be actually a square. Maybe it's an 8-inch by 8-inch square. So you have to think through what is the appropriate size of your portfolio. Now, the problem is you haven't really started working with it yet. And this is where I've said that portfolios are fundamentally an iterative design process. You have to kind of start to get feedback on whether you like it or not. Maybe you know you want a square and you're going to work that in. Maybe you're not sure yet. If you're not sure, I'd recommend sticking with an 8.5 by 11, but I would choose landscape. There's something about landscape in portfolios that just looks a little bit better than a portrait mode. So I'm going to choose the landscape. I'm going to stick with my 8.5 by 11. The next part here is, do you want the pages to be facing each other? So that is, do we want to have a spread where the book opens and we have content on the left and content on the right? Or do we want to stick just page after page consistently? So like Gregorio did, where it's just the page is consistently one after the next. Now you guys have a slightly different challenge here, and that is that you're not physically going to print it and hand it to me. You're going to give me a digital PDF. And so in that context, maybe it's better to do non-facing pages where it's just one page after the next. But again, it's a different look, it's a different style to the portfolio, and it's something that you have to think through. When I applied to grad school, there was a distinct limit on the number of physical pieces of paper you could have in your portfolio. I think the number was 12. And because of that limit, you ended up always doing facing pages because you wanted the front and back of each page. You didn't want to have it just single-sided. But in the digital realm, it's not going to be based on that anymore. So you can think about whether you want facing pages or not. I'm going to leave it checked as facing pages for right now in this example, but you could certainly change that. I'm not going to worry about columns, but I am going to come here into the margins. So the margins, I'm going to unchain them so that they're not connected together anymore. And I'm going to make the inside margin double the top, bottom, and outside. So right now the inside is at a 1/2 inch. So I want the top to be a 1/4 inch, the bottom to be a 1/4 inch, and the outside to be a 1/4 inch. So those are all 0.25. Let's keep scrolling down here. And remember, we talked about bleed. We're not worried about slug. We're looking about bleed here. And we want our bleed to be 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to leave this chain together. And I'm going to type in 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125 inches. When I hit tab to move to the next field, it will populate all of them. And so now that I have the bleed set, so I've one more time, 8.5 by 11 landscape. Margins inside is double the other 3. And my bleed is set at 1/8 of an inch on all 4. And I'll go ahead and click on create. And that gives us our first page in the portfolio. So thus far, everything that we've been working with is primarily just on one page. This is going to be a multiple page document. So our pages window is going to start to become really important. We'll come back and revisit that pages window many times today. We're looking at our primary first page. You can see that the bleed is that red line. Maybe it's kind of a pink line that goes all the way around the outside. We want anything that is full color going to the edge to go all the way out to that point. And we have right here our margins. This is where our content is safe. So our type should probably be inside of that. Color images can go beyond that. So let's go ahead and go to the pages menu and let's create 2 new pages. So we have page 1. I'm going to come down here to the plus sign and create pages 2 and page 3. And you can see that they're facing each other because I have a left page and a right page. So this first page would be either my cover or just a blank page that I would end up discarding. And this first page, 2 and 3, that would be the information about myself. This is where I'd be putting my name, page 2. This might be the table of contents, page 3. So let's continue and create 2 more, pages 4 and page 5. And so now I have page 2, 3, and spread 4, 5. So this is spread 4, 5, and this is where my first content would go. So if I scroll back up, there's pages 2 and 3, and there's page 1. So at this point, we can start thinking about lines that might help us in our layout. So maybe we want to establish those 2/3, 1/3 lines. We can draw a guide on our page by clicking on the ruler and then creating a guide. Remember, if I hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, it will jump as we go through. So this should be 5.5, which would be right there. And so that might give us a guide as we start to create our content. But that guide only appears on page 5. It's not appearing on page 4. It's not appearing on the first page. So on something like a guide, maybe I want that guide to appear on every page. Well, that's where something called a master can really be useful. And so you see on our pages window here, up at the top, I have something called an A master. That A master, anything that I put on it will show up on any one of these pages. So let's go up to the A master. Actually, before I do that, let me delete this guide. I just clicked on it and pressed delete. Let me go up to the A master now. There it is. Let me press Control-0 so I can see the whole page. And let me drag that guide over here. Again, I'm going to hold down Shift so that I jump to my ruler lines. There it is. Now notice when I created it on the masker, when I go back and double click on either page 1, that guide shows up. Page 3, that guide shows up. Page 5, that guide shows up. So anything that I create up here on the master will show up on every page. So if, for example, I created a box I'm just making this up right now. Notice that that box in preview form shows up on page 1, page 3, and page 5. So the idea of a master is that that's where anything goes that's going to appear consistently page after page. The only exception to this rule is sometimes text doesn't work as nicely on a master. So we'll get to text in just a little bit. So I've established on this A master, I've established the, let me move over here a little bit. We've got that dividing line for the 2/3, 1/3. Maybe I want one over on this side. So once again, I'm going to pull a guide over. I'm going to hold down Shift, and this is going to go right there. Now, maybe I also want to create a flow line that goes across the top of the page. That's consistent. So I'm not going to do a 2/3, 1/3 here. I'm going to do maybe do it right about there, about 1.5 inches down. That feels about right. If I want it to apply to both pages, I can move the mouse outside of the page, and you can see that that guide goes all the way across both pages. If I want to stick to it just on one page, I'm inside the page. So let me drag myself out, and that gives me that guide. And since we're here, let's go ahead and do the same thing down here at the bottom, because I may use that later on as well. So the key here is that I'm setting up these guides up on the master so that they will then apply to all of the pages down below. And it's a little bit hard to see it right now because there's no content on any of the pages just yet. But let's say, let's go back up to the A master. Let's say that I wanted there to be a little bit of a gray bar that went across the top of the page, for example. Well, I could create a rectangle that went across the top. Let's make it have a fill color. Well, it's black. Let's make it have a gray fill color. I'm going to do a K value here. So 0, 0, 0 for CMY. My K, let's do 30. That'll give me a 30% gray, kind of a light gray. And now I have that light gray established. Notice that it's appearing on page 1, page 3, and page 5, but it's not on the other pages yet because I don't have it up here on this side of the master. So I could take that same piece, I could copy it, go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste. And I could drop that in there as well. So now that gray bar goes all the way across the 2 pages, whether it's on page 4, 5 or page 2, 3. Now pages 2 and 3 were meant to be my kind of title, introductory, table of contents pages. So I really didn't want the gray bar there. Well, that's a problem because I can't just delete the gray on these pages without creating a new master. So you don't need to just have one master. So I can actually take this master here. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can select both. I can right click on it and I can say duplicate master. Now it's called the B master. Well, the B master, maybe I don't want the B master to have these gray bars anymore. So I'll delete those, but the rest of the pieces are all still here. Well, if I didn't want pages 2 and 3 to have that master, I can actually change the master that's applied. Let me hold down Shift and select pages 2 and 3. I could right click and I could say apply master to pages. And we're going to change to the B master for pages 2 and 3. And lo and behold, on pages 2 and 3, the gray bar is gone. You can also see in the upper right corner of these pages that it now says B instead of A. There is also a none, so you can apply the none master to a page to get rid of everything. So maybe this page 1, my cover, maybe I'd apply none. So apply master to pages. We can go to none, and now nothing's applied there. No layouts, no guidelines, nothing. So there's pages 2 and 3, and there's pages 4 and 5 that have that gray bar. So as I start to set this stuff up, there may be other elements that I want to appear page after page. So I can, in my master, set up, and come up here, I could set up frames that I could then place objects in. So I'm going to go, sorry, Control minus here to zoom out. I could take a frame and I could make a frame that is, I want this to be full color. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it goes all the way out to the bleed lines. There it is. And that frame is then going to appear on pages 4 and 5. And I can actually place into that frame. The problem with creating the frame there is that you can't select it anymore. You can't edit it. So I actually tend not to create the frames on the masters. I reserve the masters just for things that repeat on every page. So this gray bar and my guidelines. Then I would come down here to pages 4 and 5, and I go ahead and I drop my image in. So let's go ahead and create this. All right, so I need to drop some content in here. So let me go on my, sorry, it's not jumping for me there. There we go. Let me go to File and then Place. And we're going to go to my flash drive here. And I don't remember whether I have anything already in this folder. Sample files, let's see. I have no idea what this even is. All right, so let me right click. Let me go to Fitting. Let me fill frame proportionally. So it's like a floor plan of some kind. Let me fill it with an image right now. Let me go to File and then Place. Just so that you can see it a little bit better. We'll use an image from last class. Let me right click on it and I'm going to go to Fitting and I'll choose Fill Frame Proportionally. And there we are. Now, in this context, you see that my gray bar that was going across the top of the page is now behind where this image was. So that brings to light another interesting thing that we can do on the master pages. So let me come up here into my A master. And I want to change the layer structure. So let me go back over here to Properties. And it doesn't look like we have layers. Let me go up to Window. And I'm going to open the Layers window. There it is. And I'm going to create a second layer. And this layer 2, I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to rename it Master. Then I'm going to take those gray objects and I'm going to move them up to that master layer. So I'll come up here and I'm going to drag them all the way up to the master layer. I probably also should have made these full bleed as well. So let me make that a little bit bigger. Take this one and make this one a little bit bigger. There it is. So they go all the way to my bleed. They're on the master layer, which means they're on top of the content that's on layer 1. So if I were to jump back to this page again, we'd see that the gray bar does in fact go across the top of my image now. Now maybe I wanted that gray bar to have some transparency. So I'll come back here. I could take this gray, and actually I'm going to hold down Shift and select the other one as well. Let's go into our properties. Let's go to opacity, and let's make the opacity 50%. And I may find that I need that gray to be a little bit darker to get the effect that I want, but let's have a look. So I've adjusted it. Let's go back to my pages. Let's come down to my pages 4 and 5. And yes, that gray bar is transparent, or is somewhat transparent. Remember, at any point in time, if you want to get rid of all the guides, you can go up to the View menu and you can come here. Let's see, View, and we're going to go to Screen Mode, and we can go to Preview, and that makes everything go away so we can see our overall layout. Come back here to View, Screen Mode, Normal. And so let's think about our text or our fonts. So I'm going to go ahead and create a text box. And I'm not going to do this on the master. I'm going to do this on the page itself. And that's because if you put a text box on the master, much like a frame, you have to place the text into the text box. You can't just double click it. So I want to be able to write directly on it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a little text box here. Maybe like that. I'm going to switch over into my typography tool set. There it is. Let me go into my paragraph. We're going to align to the right here. We can go to my character. And let's see, we'll just start with an Arial. And we want to do an Arial regular. Let's try it at 14 points. And we'll say this is project 1. And I'm going to go, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do a black, which is as thick as it is, as it can be. And we're going to up the size here. We'll go to 36. Okay, so I have project 1 listed there. I'm going to shrink the text box. And then let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this text box, Control C. And then I'm going to paste it, Control V. I'll move that right up there. Now remember, I can use those align tools. So if I go to Window and then Align, Window, Object, and Layout, Align. We did this last class. I like this placement. I'm going to hold down Shift. This will be my key object, and I could distribute the spacing in between them at, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. And let's put the spacing in between them at a 1/16 of an inch. And there they are. Looks like maybe they need to be moved up just a little bit so that they're on. There we go. And I want to move them over so they have a gap. This text here is definitely too big. So let's go, we're going to go to Arial regular. And we're going to go to maybe 10 point. Let's go a little bit smaller, 8 point. There it is. Now we can fill this with placeholder text. So I can go up to the type menu and we can go, let's see here, fill with placeholder text. And it'll fill it with some temporary text for us. Maybe this needs to be a little bit bigger. Let me go to type, fill with placeholder text, and it fills it out a little bit more. Maybe that's a little bit much. We'll go back to there, right? So these are all a little bit tight, I think. So let's move this over. And I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard, and I actually think this needs to go down a little bit. Right about like that. Move this one over so that they're in a line. And so I've established this is project 1, and this is some text about that project 1, for example. Now, if I want this text to repeat on one of these other pages, what I can do is I can select these. I'll hold down Shift, like that. I can go to Edit, Copy, and then I could jump up to this page 2. Actually, I should probably go to pages 6 and 7. And I can, on page 6 here, I can go to Edit and then Paste in Place, which will put the text in exactly the same spot on this page. So that's a better strategy for text than doing it on a master. So there's one last piece that I want to show you here. And then obviously you'll spend some time working to get this sorted out today, and you'll start your layouts and what have you. But that is, what about page numbers? Well, the beautiful thing about InDesign is you can actually create page numbers on your masters. Let me go back here to Essentials, so that when you rearrange pages, the page numbers also rearrange. So right here under my A master, I'm going to double click. There it is. And I can put a page number on this page. All I need is a text box. There it is. And on that, in that text box on the master, I need to go up to type and then insert page number. Excuse me, insert special character, marker, current page number. So it's type, insert special character, markers, current page number, and it shows up as an A. Well, the reason it shows up as an A is because it's on the A master. But any other page that has this applied to it, say page 7, will have a 7 there. This has, it's too hard to see, has a 5 there. Let's go back to my A master and let's make some edits to this text. And this is where you can use your type and typography to your advantage. Let me come back to page 5 here. Right? I could create a heading text or a style. Let me go into typography. Right? I could create a character style out of this, and I could call that heading. Oops. And I could say, okay. I could also create a body character style. And likewise, under paragraph styles, I could create a paragraph style for body. And that just allows me to reuse these page after page. So let's go back up into my essentials. And I'm going to switch to my master. And I'm going to select the text. And then I will open up my characters. Let's see here. And unfortunately, I keep switching out of typography. I should just leave it there for right now because I'm dealing with fonts. And let's go to character styles. And I can use the heading style, which would then make the page number match the heading that I was using. So let's go into paragraph. Let's go to the right. Let's drop this down into that corner, right, like that. And that will then be updated on my pages. There it's as 5, and there it is as 7. Now, maybe it's a little bit hard to read it on the image here. So in that scenario, maybe I'd change on my master this page number to be white. So I'm no longer going to be able to see it. So I'll double click on this T, and I'll change the color of it to be white. I won't see it on my master anymore, but I will see it on my page. So just different strategies. I wouldn't see it here because I don't have an image file yet. If I needed to put an image file in, I could go up to my frames. I should, by the way, be creating, let me go to layers. I need to make sure that I'm on layer 1, not on the master, so that when I create this, it will be behind the master. So let's go right there. Make sure I'm snapping to that guide. Okay, oops. And there it is. And I will go ahead and I'll place this. I'll go to File and then Place. And we'll drop a different image in. I'm going to right click and go to Fitting. I'll fill frame proportionally. And there's that next project page. Notice that the page number is showing up there as well. If I wanted to have a page number on the other side of the page, sorry, go to Pages. And I hold down space bar to pan. I could take this page number here. I could copy it. I could go to Edit and then Paste. I could put it right over here. And maybe this one, because it's There we go. There it is in black. And let me go to paragraph and we'll left justify it. And so now if I came back to my pages here, we would have the page number there. We'd have the page number there, there, and there. Okay, so we've made it to 9 o'clock, so I want to make sure that I let you guys go. If you're in my first check-in group, please feel free to stick around, and we'll start going through questions about today, etc. The rest of you, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share right now. Unless anybody has any global questions, you're free to go, and I'll see you at check-ins today.
Thanks for class.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor.
Professor.
You bet.